President Barack Obama this week gave the green light to offshore oil drilling and sent his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, to Ottawa, Canada, to discuss the future of the Arctic. Sparks flew, and we're here this week with the Foreign Minister of Canada, the Honorable Lawrence Cannon. I'm Pamela Falk for CBS News. Mr. Minister, let's start with the contentious issues. First of all, what was the controversy, particularly about the Arctic, with the Secretary of State? And if you don't mind answering the question, who owns the North Pole?
Okay. First, let me point out that this meeting was convened under the auspices of, first and foremost, the initiative of the Government of Canada, our initiative to bring together coastal states. Now, the coastal states are Russia, Canada, obviously the United States of America, Norway, as well as Denmark. And this is done purposely to be able to discuss issues that are common to both Canada, the United States, obviously, but to coastal states, generally speaking. What are those issues? First issue is the delineation of the continental shelf under the rules of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas. Second issue that we wanted to be able to discuss was search and rescue. What happens in terms of emergency preparedness? So as the ice is melting in the Arctic and temperature is changing, obviously that opens up new routes to be able to go from, for instance, London to Tokyo, either through the eastern side of the passage or the western side of the passage, which is on the Canadian side. So that's sort of the context, and we're saying, well, I think we have to take stock of the fact that ice is melting, and yes, we do have to put in place policies that in the event that something occurs, we'll be ready for it.
So to some extent,
yes,
this comes about because of global warming.
In many respects it does, Pamela. It comes about because of global warming and because of an increased attention that's being paid to the Arctic. Now, Canada's an Arctic power, and we of course look at this and we say, well, we have to be prepared for it. Now, where there was a dispute was not on those fundamental issues. The dispute was there is another organization, which is known as the Arctic Council, that sort of umbrellas every gesture, every political action that's taken in the North. And the Arctic Council did not and was not invited to this meeting.
And so ultimately the Aboriginal groups were left out.
Ultimately the permanent participants were left out. I took it upon myself to meet Canada's permanent participants. I spoke to our premiers in the Northwest Territories, the Yukon, Nunavut, so that they indeed knew exactly what we were discussing. But these are things that are common between states. So for instance, the Exxon Valdez, if another catastrophe like that takes place, search and rescue, emergency preparedness, it's Canada and the United States that work on that. Mm-hmm. It's not Sweden that works on that. It's not Finland that works on that. In the case of a disaster or catastrophe, it's the countries that indeed are responsible for their border management that will do the task. So that is the position that Canada has taken. We did have a discussion on this. I could go so far as to say Secretary of Clinton was in complete agreement with the positions that were taken, although she did want to defend the Arctic Council's right. And we, once again, agree that the Arctic Council is the premier forum for discussions on all Arctic issues. But when comes the sovereignty of states, we won't be dictated as to what we must do and how we must go about doing and exercising our sovereignty.
All right, and in what is usually a very friendly relationship between Canada and the United States, it appeared to be somewhat sparks flying. You're very diplomatic, she's very diplomatic, but she said she was notified by these groups that they wanted to be a part of it, and so there was a back and forth. Has all this been patched up?
Well, you know, I point out here again that in the words of Napoleon Bonaparte, who was a great statesman, as you know, I mean, the issue states actually practice the politics of the geography, and that has been like that through the ages. So we will continue to make our points known. I actually, for instance, asked the United States and suggest very strongly to my colleague that very shortly the United States government follow up on their intention to sign and ratify, not sign, that's done,
right,
but to ratify the United Nations Convention, the Law of the Seas, which actually is the governing body that tells us how to go about and do Arctic mapping.
All right, so that now to the next contentious issue.
Yes.
The United States hasn't signed the Law of the Sea. I mean, hasn't ratified it, as
Correct.
you mentioned.
Yeah.
Without the United States ratification of the Law of the Sea, who decides not only who owns it, but all of this offshore drilling money, the minerals around the North Pole and in the Arctic generally?
Well, actually, Pam, what President Obama announced was within the
U.S. territory.
Within U.S. territory and within the 200 nautical miles economic zone. So we all possess that. When we talk about continental shelf mapping, that's beyond that area.
In addition, I mean, beside the fact that the United States hasn't signed on to these limits, there's generally agreement that there's the 12 miles and the 200 exclusive
correct.
economic zone.
That's right. So there's no problem from that perspective. What we find a little funny here is that we've got 4 coastal states who have signed on to this and said, look, when you're doing the mapping of the continental shelf, it's science-based. The convention writes out specifically what has to be done, how it must be done, under what circumstances, what's the delineation of, for instance, the ridges that are there. And so all that is done on a scientific base. Now, we work with the United States in doing that mapping, as a matter of fact. We have one of our icebreakers that is out there in the summer months with Coast Guard vessels from the United States, and that work is done together. But I would hope that in the very near future, that ratification takes place so that we will, all 5 of us, have in place the policies that will govern the way we function in the High North.
And that brings me to the obvious question. Did you get any indication from the United States? They've said they might, they're thinking about, they're approaching, that the United States
didn't.
I'd
leave Secretary Clinton with that response.
Are you hopeful that the United States will be
Well,
part?
I think, the Obama administration has indicated in the past that it does intend to do something in that regard. So myself and our government hope that in the very near future that will be done. We do have, and we've managed contentious issues with the United States, as friends do, in a civilized manner. So we have a border dispute, particularly in the Beaufort Sea, as to where that line is, as you know. That's one of the issues. We've got Canada's Northwest Passage, which is somewhat contested by the United States government. It is in Canadian sovereign territory. The United States government says it's in international waters. We dispute that. We've managed that since 1987. But I think that as the ice is melting, I should say, we need to now step up to the plate and start doing the negotiation that's required to be able to make sure that we do know where our border is between Canada and the United States on a going forward basis, as well as determining finally the Northwest Passage, the Canadian Northwest Passage. So those are the issues
that's
that
a
we need to
very
look at.
contentious issue. I want to come back to that. Just on the Law of the Sea and the question about the North Pole. If the United States doesn't sign on before these negotiations go forward, the theory is that the 4 nations involved will be making a decision among themselves, and then the winner there will be the one fighting with the United States.
Well, the idea here, Pam, is to be able to, in Canada's case, we will be tabling, for instance, the scientific research. We've got a date here at the United Nations to table it in front of the Commission before or by 2013. So we are progressing on our timelines. We've put a lot of money into this initiative, and so we will be ready by 2013 to do it. The Russians have done it. The Danes have just finished. I'm sorry, I think the Norwegians have just completed that, and the Danes are doing it. So we're all getting there.
So the odd man out is the United States.
Well, yes, that's it.
Now, on that front, the Russians did drop a flag and dropped an anchor and raised a flag in 2007 and said, "We own it." Has that calmed down? Are the Russians more on board with the
Well, I think, on the North Pole, I don't get overly excited with what the Russians do, quite honestly. We've seen for years a number of countries go and put their flag on Mount Everest and say, we claim it. So whether, you use a submarine and you go do it there,
no one's taking that too seriously.
This is all done on...
Make Santa move or anything.
No, I mean, you're talking about the Lomonosov Ridge that's not very far from the North Pole. It's all going to be scientifically based on the Convention of the Law of the Sea.
All right, so back to the Northwest Passage. There was a major problem last year, I believe it was last spring, when the United States sent a submarine up.
That was a couple of years ago.
And I guess time flies.
Yeah.
And sent a submarine up, and there was a confrontation with Canada, where Canada does say it's its own territory. What would happen in this case, now that there is more likelihood that there would be a passage used by U.S. ships, because it is water, not ice, if it were to happen again?
Well, look, we're going to assume our responsibilities. We're going to exercise our sovereignty. We feel that this is Canadian territory. We are historically, this has...
Exercising sovereignty meaning stopping the U.S.?
Well, we're going to exercise sovereignty by the pursuit of diplomatic means. We won't hesitate to send a diplomatic note to speak directly to the government of the United States and say, look, this is Canadian territory, and we have long-standing claims to this territory, and so that's what I mean by exercising our sovereignty. And the international community will as well support our outstanding position.
Now, not to talk too much about politics, but there is quite a bit of speculation in your press and in our press here in the United States about the idea that there's more contentiousness between the U.S. administration of Barack Obama and your Prime Minister, Harper, because of the politics, because one's a conservative and President Obama is less conservative. Do you think that plays a role in less friendly U.S.-Canada relations?
Pam, I've been asked that question on several occasions, and I've witnessed now several meetings between the Prime Minister as well as the President, and I wouldn't give any credence to the affirmation that because one has a political ideology or a political philosophy, I should say, and the other one has one. These are two young men that are fathers, that have young families, that are looking for practical solutions. Relations aren't strained between Canada and the United States. We are two friends, we live beside each other, and we find ways to move forward and to advance things. Now, I look at what was done, for instance, setting up all of the economic reconstruction and recovery programs, starting with Washington and what the G20 has done. I looked at the leadership that President Obama and Prime Minister Harper have played in bringing the parties together and putting forward stimulus packages and making sure that we combat protectionism, making sure that we pursue, for instance, trade initiatives. These are all things that our governments, as well as other governments, have put forward. But these two leaders are actually working very well together because of the practical nature of finding solutions to problems.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Given that, I read through your biography, and you've been in government for many years in foreign service as foreign minister, and you were in the private sector for many years as well. What is your combined take on the offshore oil drilling? I mean, President Obama changed course, really, in giving this green light. He was very much against it during the campaign. Do you think you will have environmentalists upset as he does in the United States?
Well, Canada has a regime in place that requires regulatory buy-in. We have environmental laws that are respected, and any company that wants to go and undertake a new drilling has to abide by our environmental code, our environmental standards. And so it is with any other, I would understand, any other country, for instance, here in the United States. We certainly believe that there is obviously potential. The High North and the Arctic has a potential of over 13 to 20% of untapped oil reserve, a lot of natural gas. But we've put in place our own policies, and we have our Northern Strategy. And that pillar is, the pillars of that Northern Strategy deal with yes, economic development, yes, governance structures, but obviously deal with environmental sustainability. So we are making sure that as we move forward, eventually down that lane or down that road, we will protect the pristine nature of the environment, whether it be through drilling, whether it be through fish harvesting. Those are the principles that we've put in place, and we want to make sure that they will be well respected, yet you cannot have any economic, social development in the high north without any economic development. So both have to go hand in glove.
And is your sense, you are in favor of all of this, what they call in the United States during the campaign, drill, baby, drill, just moving forward on the offshore oil drilling?
Well, I don't want to get, I don't want to get involved in the domestic debate that is ongoing here in the United States, but I do think that as these fossil fuels become more and more rare because they do not regenerate themselves, we have to be able to, at the same time, look at what renewable energy is. How do we go about and put those in place? We are doing that in Canada. We are making sure that on an ongoing basis, we are investing as well considerably, because anybody talks about Canada talks about our oil sands in Alberta as well as in parts of Saskatchewan, where we're investing considerably in carbon capture and storage. We've put forward roughly $3.5 to $5 billion just in developing the technology. We work with other countries. I was working, or at least speaking, with another foreign country, particularly the Norwegians, who as well have a great deal of experience in terms of drilling offshore, but also doing a great deal of storage and capture. So we're looking forward to working with them. I think that you will be able to go beyond and do a good job in climate change because you are developing the technological tools to be able to master that.
And so in some ways you have a lot more experience, and you think there's a way to find that balance.
I definitely do, and that's always been the Canadian position of our government. Is, I go back to years ago when former Prime Minister Mulroney in Canada and President Reagan worked together on the acid rain initiative. You'll remember up in the northwestern part and the northeastern part, there's a great deal of the industrial complex is strong there, so there was quite a bit of acid rain that came from the smokestacks of a lot of these manufacturing plants. And we were able to work with the American government and the Americans with us to be able to develop the technology that was able to rid ourselves of acid rain. And you don't hear about acid rain anymore. Right. It has been technologically mastered.
And you think the same will happen on
the offshore? Well, I think the same will happen there on the offshore. The technologies are there to be able to do that and make sure that we protect and have sustainable development and protect the environment.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground. Just one little last wrap question on the Haiti Donor Conference.
Yes.
Canada donated an awful lot of money. There's a lot of skepticism in Haiti about where there's so much money pledged and it doesn't seem to get there. What is your take on, was this successful, and will it actually turn things around?
Well, I'm quite encouraged by what took place here, and over the course of the last several months since the 12th of January. Right after the terrible earthquake, we, as a Canadian government, brought together a number of parties at the Montreal conference, and we brought them together for the purpose of putting in place the basis for a number of principles: accountability, transparency, who's going to be getting the money and how are they going to be spending it. So I was very pleased to see at the outset of this meeting that the principles that we bought into in Montreal were indeed reflected in the chairman's statement at the end, and everybody bought into that. Now, why am I encouraged as well? Because the Haitian Authority, the government, has come forward with its plan, and in its plan they have specifically mentioned that from now and for the next 18 months, these are the tasks that need to be done. The needs assessment that was established by the United Nations. And also, I must say, the work that was done by former President Clinton on being able to bring the private sector as well as the civilian sector into play. All of that was extremely conducive to a very interesting and, I'd say, successful meeting that took place here yesterday. Now, one point on that, though. It's important that the Haitians themselves, in their program, where they say they want to modify their institutions, that they indeed go forward and modify their institutions, that they indeed decentralize, because that is one of the things they want to do in terms of their government. So that
meaning
needs to be
move out
done.
of Port-au-Prince.
Exactly, and decentralize the administration of their government regionally. And they're going to get a lot of help from a lot of governments, including France, on that specific issue. Right. They're going to have to be putting in place the ethical tools that will avoid corruption. So there has to be a national consensus. Now, this is easy to say, but the responsibility on President Préval's shoulders, as well as his Prime Minister, is immense. It's enormous. The money's there. We know what needs to be done, but the Haitians themselves, as a sovereign state, need to go forward and demonstrate to the world that they have our full confidence by doing exactly what they've set out to do.
Well, we have covered so much ground, and clearly there's a lot on your agenda. We thank the Foreign Minister, the Honorable Lawrence Cannon, for being with us today. I'm Pamela Falk for CBS News. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you.